Oh, please welcome Martin Luther King III and his wife, Arndrea Waters King, leaders of the Drum Major Institute, a nonprofit co-founded by Dr. Martin Luther King in 1961 to address the problems of racism and poverty and violence. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
On race relations, some, in fact, many have interpreted Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech to mean that he longed for a color-blind society. Did he?
Colorblind would not actually characterize. What he envisioned was a nation where everyone could be treated fairly in dignity, with dignity and justice. And ultimately, yes, it would mean colorblind. I don't know how we as a society totally get there.
Martin Luther King Jr. never said a colorblind society. What he talked about is color not being a barrier to fully participating in society.
Dr. King said he hoped to address racism and income inequality by promoting an agenda he himself called radical.
Racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.
Given the common use and understanding of that term today, would Dr. King still call his agenda radical?
You know, I would say the fact of the matter, what makes it radical is that we're not doing it. And so because we're not doing it, it sounds radical. It really is not necessarily radical. What may be the radical part of it, though, is redistributing wealth. That's the part that society chooses to ignore. Radical is still appropriate for what he was talking about.
The very last sermon that he ever delivered was at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. And in that sermon, he talked about remaining awake through a revolution. And so one of the last charges that he gave was for each of us to stay awake, to stay woke. And it's so interesting to us that, 56 years later, being woke is now turned, is being coined as something bad, or and when you really think and know that that was the last instruction of Martin Luther King Jr., for us to wake up, for us to not sleep through a revolution, to wake up and do something to make this world better, not only for you and your family, but for all of God's children, so that we really can sit at the table of sisterhood and brotherhood. There's nothing negative about that. So it's just interesting how language, or if you really don't know the full context of particular quotes, you kind of people, particularly this time of year, they sample them like a buffet or sample them like a record, as opposed to really diving into the full meal. And so that's one of the things that we hope that people will continue to do, certainly on the King holiday, but throughout the year.
Mr. King, after your father died, when, how, and why did you forgive his killer?
The reality is, and people have not accepted this, but I'm going to say this. I rarely discuss it, but James L. Ray did not kill my father. James L. Ray was a patsy. And there's documentation to show that. We did a civil suit in 1999, and 75 witnesses corroborated what had happened. So I'll start there. But way before that, when my grandmother was gunned down in 1974, 6 years after my father, I heard my grandfather say often, "I refuse to allow the man that killed my lovely wife, nor the man that killed my son, to reduce me to hatred. I love everybody. I'm every man's brother." So between those 6 years, while I was 16 at the time my grandmother was killed, I was 10 when my father was killed. And so through that process, the process of forgiveness began over those years. And ultimately, I had to make a decision. Either I'm going to embrace hatred or I'm going to embrace love. It doesn't mean you forget, but it means you move beyond. And that's what I hope we personify in terms of our lives. Everybody may not do that, and that's fine, because everyone has the right to make their own choice. But I think we create a better society when we learn how to forgive, and we learn that we have to come together collectively and move forward to create a better nation in the world.
Mr. and Mrs. King, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.